I think I get it.
That's always good, to bring it together and get it worked out. Okay, I'll let him know. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, but you know, I'm not
Yeah, we
gonna
have
say,
to, yeah.
this tax must be reoffered, because then that, it's
Yeah,
Well, you gotta do the third round.
no, I know, yeah, no, I'm gonna whip it for it. I'm gonna whip it, so I'll get
And then you understand, and then,
Oh, yeah.
yes, ma'am.
But he also.
Okay.
Yes, funny, I said to him, I said, you know, I think the narrative it was in city are pretty passionate about that. But Sly James is really, really passionate about this. So it's funny that you said that. It's funny.
Oh, hey. So you make anything. I'm gonna testify on behalf of your.
We're not gonna do that.
Okay, all right.
You're able to put it together with some other. Fill that out.
Committee on Economic Development will come into order. Secretary, please call.
I don't know if there's anybody else.
Again, I gotta be here for 2 others, so.
Representatives Rowden, Orlew, Austin, Beard, Butler, Hogan, Dunn, here, Hanson,
Here.
Johnson, Kratky,
Here.
Lichtenegger, Couch,
Here.
Rizzo.
Then what you think I've got?
For being present, we will begin today by hearing Civil 194, sponsored by Senator Richard. Senator, welcome to the lighter side of the building.
That's the what side?
The lighter side.
Lighter side.
Take that however you want.
All right, well, I was, you know her for many years. I appreciate the work you all do. How's Grandma doing now? Good, good. Okay, I'm here to testify on Senate Bill 194, the Business Facility Tax Credit. This bill extends the Business Facility Tax Credit sunset date from 2020 to 2025. And according to the Tax Credit Analyst Form 14 for 2015, every dollar of the credit tax reduces the following over 10 years. $14.30 in new personal income, $18.72 in new value added, and $27.48 in new economic output. When I passed this, and when I chaired economic development, I think Representative Kratky was my vice chair back then, your worst half. The extension for the tax credit was 2009. Burns McDonnell had planned on creating 1,000 new jobs and putting in $60 million in investments. The actual investment from Burns McDonnell was $200 million, and they created 3,000 jobs with an average salary of $110,000 per job. And why do they need the extension now? Because they're expanding so fast. In 2014, Burns McDonnell announced an expansion in partnership with Van Trust Real Estate on property adjacent to the headquarters complex at Warnell and Bannister Roads. The first phase expected to be completed in late 2016 with up to 1,400 new employee owners. The second phase of the project is a building on Warno Road to add 700 new jobs. The second phase will not be completed in time to earn the credit by 2020. Therefore, we're asking for the extension. With that, I'll ask the question.
Senator, any questions for the witness? Representative Craig. Proceed.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thanks for your hard work. I don't have the House bill in front of me. I don't know if you know, is there any difference, do you know, from the House bill and your bill?
I think you can ask Dryling. I don't think there is. First Fred.
All right, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Other questions for the bill?
Just to briefly comment, I've said this before in the committee, this is an absolute no-brainer. This has got like a 3-to-1 return on your investment at least. They're creating jobs hand over fist in Kansas City right now. Kansas would just salivate to get a company like this across the state line. So in my opinion, I'm happy to support this, happy to support it as soon as we can to get this across the finish line as quickly as we possibly can. So thank you, Senator, for carrying it.
And keep in mind too, I mean, most of the expansions in St. Louis at headquarters, but there is, Kansas City, but there is, Burns McDonald that work in St. Louis, and I think they've created, I think Fred told me around 300 jobs in St. Louis, expanding in St. Louis also. And they can hire engineers fast enough the way they're expanding, so.
Other questions? Seeing none, anyone who wishes to testify in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Fred Rowden today representing Burns McDonald. I want to thank this committee for its support. This bill is exactly the same as House Bill 468. This bill, Senate Bill 194, came over from the Senate and passed 33-0, which is a rarity in the Senate to have a tax credit bill passed like that. So we appreciate this committee's support, and we thank our sponsor. You have to answer any questions?
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you, testimony. Further support.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bill Gamble, City of Kansas City, would like to go on record in support of the bill. We're very fortunate to have an employer like Burns McDonald. Very fortunate to City of Kansas City, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, further support.
Members of the committee, Tracy King, here representing the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, would like to go on record in support of the bill.
Thank you, Tracy. Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further support.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries in Missouri, also want to go on record in support of this bill.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Further support. Seeing none, anyone who wishes to testify against Senate Bill 194? Seeing none, those for informational purposes only. Seeing none, that will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 194. Any closing comments, Senator?
No, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir. And the gavel over to Vice Chairman Corlew for House Bill 865.
Going on here, House Bill 865, sponsored by Representative Rowden. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Caleb Rowden, 44th District, Columbia, Boone County, Randolph County. Today we are have House Bill 865, which does a number of things, but I think of most importance, it clarifies and provides some a solid foundation to some broad business practices around the state. It does three things. It says that local ordinance cannot implement a ban the box ordinance. It says that local ordinance cannot raise minimum wage, and it says that local ordinance cannot mandate sick leave requirements on private business. So a little bit of background as to how we got here. My city, the city of Columbia, last a number of months ago implemented a ban the box ordinance, which was the most extreme in the country for a couple of reasons. For one, it was the first in the country to apply to private business, and secondly, it was the first in the country to say that an employer could not ask if an applicant was a felon until after an employment offer had been extended. And so what that means in practical terms is that in the city of Columbia today, a daycare center cannot ask a potential child abuser if they are in fact a child abuser until after they have offered them a job, which I would hope that we would all freely admit is absurd to say the least, and troubling at that. So, so what this is designed to do, and furthermore, let me hit the other two parts real quick. I believe local ordinance raising minimum wage, section 67.1571.1, titled Political Subdivisions, Miscellaneous Powers, quote, no municipalities defined in section 1, paragraph 2, subsection 9 shall establish, mandate, or otherwise require a minimum wage that exceeds the state as currently in state statute. I don't believe I'm doing anything new there except providing clarification for a law that was passed a number of years ago. The overarching theme for me is understanding the fundamental role of government at the various levels. I think it's important for us to make a couple of distinctions. One, states are responsible for enacting city government. The states are also responsible for the creation of the federal government. And so when you talk about where within those three levels of government, I think it's important for us to make some of those distinctions and not to necessarily just willy-nilly apply a local government or a local control argument to some more significant and more just some more variables in the discussion. And so I think it's important for us to make those distinctions and to set up and set apart what the fundamental ban-the-box minimum wage and sick leave, they need to have it at the state level because our perspective is such that we are able to see across municipalities. And so we have the ability to make decisions that if they impact multiple municipalities or impact business owners that operate throughout local different municipalities, that we have the ability to see that. Our perspective is such that we can do that. In Columbia, if Columbia passes a trash collection ordinance that doesn't apply to the people or the businesses in Ashland or in Centralia or any of the other areas around Columbia, but when you pass issues like these via local ordinance, you're affecting a number of businesses, business owners, and in turn workers throughout the region that you're in. And so this is designed to fix that and to ensure that if we're going to have these conversations, that we're having them at an appropriate level of government. And I believe that in these three cases, that level would be the state level. So then I'd love to take any questions.
Any questions for the bill? Representative Rizzo.
So just for the record here, this doesn't allow local control on ban-the-box, minimum wage, and mandated sick leave, correct? That seems like the trifecta of bad. With all due respect, I mean, I don't understand why local governments wouldn't be the best to decipher some of these things. I think St. Louis has already, they did the ban-the-box, am I correct?
They did it in the public sector, which I don't, there's no reason why the state wouldn't allow public sector ban-the-box to go into effect.
Your example of a person working at a daycare that was a former child abuser, I would probably agree with that out and say anybody working with children, if they've had, say, a prior offense that's related to children, must disclose that. Versus just straight across the board, somebody who's passed a bad check, sure, you know, now has to.
Well,
they can't.
A couple things I would say in response. Number one, the bigger issue I don't believe is necessarily the merits of a ban-the-box ordinance. I've said a couple of times the idea behind ban-the-box taking the box off of the application so that the potential applicant has a chance to get past the application process and into, being in front of the guy or the gal that potentially is making a hire. That in and of itself, I don't know that it's a bad thing, but there are two things that I think we need to make distinctions at. One, I do think that conversation should happen at the state level, because when you do it at the local level, then you have potentially, folks who operate in multiple municipalities that have to make different applications, different things that are based on those local ordinances. And a proper place for that to happen. But then second of all, the private side, I don't believe that the state level really even has the authority or should be mandating this on private business. Now, if they want to do it in the public sector, which many folks have, even San Francisco, Kansas City, St. Louis have done that. I don't have any problem with that, and there's no reason why they shouldn't.
You just think it should just be held up to the business if they choose to do it or not.
Absolutely. And what we had in Columbia, just a little bit of context in Columbia, if you'll indulge me, there was a conversation that happened between the task force that put in place and the local Chamber of Commerce. And the conversation, they wanted to come to some resolution to where the Chamber of Commerce could be, at best supportive, and at worst just kind of stay out of it and let the process move through. And what we found is that in Columbia, a vast majority of the businesses have already taken this box off of their job application. And so the initial agreement was, we'll just take the box off and kind of the purest form of ban the box, and we'll probably live with it. But then when they did it, they took it a couple of steps further and said that you couldn't ask until after the job had been offered, and some of those things, which now the local chamber is very much against it, and I think eventually the Columbia ordinance gets thrown out.
So you're saying that the ordinance was after the job was offered, they could ask, or after
they couldn't ask until after the job had been offered. Yeah.
So if I come to you and I say, we'd like to hire you for this position, have you had a problem with children in the past at this, because I'm running a daycare? Sure. And you could say, I could legally at that point ask you, and you could.
I don't know that would constitute a job offer.
Okay, so.
Wanting to do it and actually saying, I would like to hire you, and so being some official offer, you know what I mean? There's some distinction there. I'm not sure.
What would happen, I guess, if you offer the job proper way, you found out the person had an issue with children, and could you just turn around at that point and then say, we rescind our offer?
Yeah, you could probably do that, and I think what you do is you open yourself up to litigation at that point. And so that therein lies the problem.
Thank you for the inquiry. Thank you. I think we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Don't worry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you, Representative, for bringing the bill. I do have a few questions and some concerns. I know in the bill it indicates that public employers are exempt from this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, because I asked that because the city of Kansas City not too long ago passed a ban the box ordinance, but it again is specific to employees. City. And that was one of my questions, is in terms of whether a city has already passed that sort of an ordinance, whether or not it would be retroactive. So given your example of Columbia, then, if there were employees that have been hired under the current ordinance, if this bill were to pass, and it were to be found out that someone may have had some sort of criminal history there, unless they had other issues during their term of employment, they would not be able to be allowed to be terminated. Is that correct then?
Not sure I follow the line.
So if someone has been hired.
So are you saying ours gets thrown out? Or if this bill passes?
If this bill
passes, it still doesn't affect it because the Columbia ordinance has already been passed. So this wouldn't nullify the Columbia ordinance. Now, what I do believe will happen is that the Columbia ordinance will get thrown out Because look, I currently, without this law in place, I don't believe local ordinance has the ability to do that anyway. So it gets thrown out. And then after that, they wouldn't have the ability to try and re-implement something new.
So an employer or an employee then, after, if, assuming that the Columbia ordinance is thrown out.
Sure.
If someone were hired while that law was in place, then they would be able to be fired after that law was over.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that the bandbox ordinance doesn't necessarily require, or that doesn't necessarily apply to any firing practices as opposed to hiring practices. So I don't think you can make a distinction or make a connection that because they were hired while bandbox was in place, that then that they would be open to some increased opportunity to be fired. I don't think that those two things are in any way connected, and I don't think that would be true.
I would hope not, but I do see some correlation, because if someone would not have hired someone, but for knowing that they had some sort of a criminal history, I could very easily see them then using this as a reason to then terminate that individual, even if that person had a stellar.
Yeah, I think, I think if they had gotten to the point in Columbia specifically, if they had gotten to the point where they were hired, then at that point, you couldn't say definitively that the question had been asked, but then at that point, under the bandbox ordinance currently, they could have asked the question at that point. So I would assume that in most cases, and in some cases, frankly, it may not be relevant as far as to there's a criminal background, what it is, et cetera, and maybe the employer doesn't care and a big deal to them. But I don't think that one would lead to the other, because again, we're not loosening the ability of an employer to fire someone. We are just kind of trying to loosen the requirements that were placed on them as to how they can hire them.
And sort of touch on the other two aspects of the bill. Can you sort of explain why those are included in terms of, the minimum wage and living wage and employment benefits?
Yeah, I think the minimum wage, for me, more than anything, it's already against the law. So I can't, it would be, if we are going to go down a road of trying to clarify the role of government at the state level and at the local level, I think it makes sense for us to clarify the statute that I already said, that clearly is about as well as you can, that this practice is already against the law. So, and then, I think the third one, the mandating sick leave, goes back to the ability and the authority of our level of government, frankly, but also certainly local level of government, as to their ability to tell private business how they must do what they do. And so if those conversations are going to happen because of the nature of businesses expanding across many municipalities in many cases, we have the perspective at the state level because we're on top of all of it. Whereas a local city council, they make decisions that are in the best interest of their city, but they also can't make a decision that has the same impact on a business that operates in 3 or 4 municipalities. And so what you're doing is just creating this kind of hodgepodge business environment. And I don't think ultimately that you can make an argument at the local level and all of that stuff. And I've said all along, this isn't really an argument for me personally about the merits of these 3 particular policies. I'm just saying that if we're going to have a conversation, we could and should have a conversation at the state level.
Yeah, well, and I will agree. I do think that current law is fairly clear as relates to the minimum wage, that local municipalities do not have the right to establish their own minimum wage. That seems to be pretty clear to me. However, I do think it is somewhat hypocritical to say that we don't want local municipalities sort of infringing upon the rights and freedoms of private businesses, when that's exactly what we're doing to the local municipality, is sort of infringing upon, in my opinion, their rights and their freedoms to make ordinances that they see best fit for their communities.
And I think the only thing I would say in response to that is that government really doesn't have rights and freedoms. We don't really have. We have things that are set out for us by United States Constitution, federal law, those sorts of things. So to make a distinction between the rights and freedoms of individuals as opposed to the rights and freedom of businesses, I think I don't think that's apples to apples, but I certainly understand your point.
U.S. Supreme Court seems to differ on that with certain cases that have come before them here recently. But, again, I think I will have to respectfully disagree with you on this, but thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Representative, as a matter of policy in the state, are we in employment at will state?
Say that again.
Are we in an employment at will state as a matter of public policy? In other words, are there, except for specified reasons, discrimination being one of them, can an employer fire their or terminate the employment of their employees? And could an employer terminate an employee because of a criminal violation?
Yeah.
And they could do so at any time during the employment, right?
Yeah, that is my understanding.
And does it seem odd then that we would take that the municipality would take that right away from the outset?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think, I certainly understand the motivation, the intent behind the ban the box. I absolutely do. I had a great conversation with a couple of individuals in Columbia who disagree with me on this issue, but we had a really good conversation about this, and specifically as it relates to ban the box, and I agree with your point, Representative Corley. I think specifically as it relates to ban the box, maybe for me personally, I think obviously for one, it's a state decision, but I think also you maybe are taking a shortcut to try and fix the things that ban the box are trying to help, recidivism, those sorts of things. While not necessarily being completely ill-advised, I think that there are some much more systemic undergirding things that we could definitely tackle that would probably get to the same consequence, get to the same outcome without infringing on the right of a private business owner to make decisions in the way that they see fit in their business.
And whether I as an employee or an employer would choose to terminate somebody because of a criminal background or not, and whether I think that's a good idea or not, it does seem if that's the public policy that we have in the state, it seems odd that we would create a process by which the employer would extend the money or have the interview process go through, whether it be at a stage of offering a job or even perhaps maybe later hiring the person and going through the legwork that it would take to bring that person on board. It just seems, as a matter of logic, it seems odd that we would not allow them to ask that question in the first place and therefore saving that energy and time if that's going to be the reason that they would terminate. And it seems also that it would be more beneficial to the person that's applying for the job to know at the outset. Any further questions? Representative Butler. Please proceed.
Representative, what do you expect to happen as a result of this bill passing?
Well, I think ultimately to clarify where these decisions are going to happen going forward. Obviously, there's been a fair amount of, we've seen it around the country. We begin to see it more here as far as local ordinance, in my opinion, diving into areas that they just don't have authority over. And so the goal would be to make those clarifications so that going forward, local municipalities can focus on the things that they have the ability to and have the right to focus on, and the state can do the same as well.
What do you expect to happen in your district if this bill were to pass?
I don't know that it probably depends on your perspective. For me, I don't know that it has a whole a great amount of impact based on the discussions that we had while the local ordinance was being passed. So most of the business, specifically, I'm just talking about Beta Box, I guess, but Columbia's made no attempt to try and raise the minimum wage. But specifically for Beta Box, we found out that most Columbia employers of significance don't have this box in their application anyway. And so maybe it's not as significant of a change in Columbia as some might think. I'm not sure, but.
So you don't expect this to have any impact or a significant impact on this within?
Oh, I certainly think it has. I certainly think it provides clarity for business owners, without question.
You said I don't know a couple times before you kind of gave your answer. I mean, do you have a clear, in a sense, order of events that will occur after if this legislation were to pass? Especially this is state legislation. This will be in effect for years. Do you have a clear vision of what the city of Columbia will look like, if how much different?
I think that ultimately, frankly, the city of Columbia is probably fine regardless. But there's not. We do pretty well. But I do think that this is way beyond just the city of Columbia, because I think that obviously we've had a spat with the city, but this is about broad business practices that impact not just the city of Columbia, not just the city of Kansas City, not just the city of St. Louis, but business owners that operate all throughout the state. And I think that is, if you can provide that clarity and you can provide that foundation for locals to be able to make decisions that impact locals, the state to be able to make decisions that impact the state, I certainly think it has an impact. I'm not sure it has as much of an impact on I think it has more of an impact on the business side than it would on the other side.
And that leads into my next question. You said it's bigger than the city of Columbia. Why did you make it not retroactive and not for public employees if that's where ban the boxes occurred in other areas across the state?
Sure. Well,
why did you make that decision?
I'm not sure I think that there is a very clear distinction to be made between what public entities do and what private entities do. I think we should have less control and less authority to do things and mandate things on private business than we do on public. And so as it relates to a city government making a decision about how they're going to hire or how the business practices they're going to have within their public entity, they have the right to do that. I may like it, I may not like it, but in that case, it's largely irrelevant. But when you make the distinction of a local 7-person council, 10-person council, 4-person council, telling a private entity, telling a private business, men and women who have jumped in the game and put in blood, sweat, and tears and many times done sacrificed a lot to start a business, and we're going to tell them how they can do that. I certainly think that's where you draw the line.
That sounds like you don't believe in paycheck deception for public employees.
Vote against it.
Gotcha. Good. So I do want to talk a little bit about minimum wage and ask you a question about if a municipality wanted to increase minimum wage at the local level. Now, the way I read the statute, the original, the granting minimum wage statute says that there's a Missouri minimum wage, there's a federal minimum wage, and we go whichever one is higher. So if the municipality decides to make a higher minimum wage just for their municipality, would that be something you think is good? Would that be protecting the spirit of the statute?
As far as public employees?
As far as private and public, as far as private and public employees.
Well, I think there's the distinction. I think a minimum wage conversation, according to state law, should happen at the state level. But I think the spirit of why that's in place is probably good, because again, you deal with overlapping businesses and overlapping municipalities, and businesses having to pay certain people this much here, their job application looks this way here, looks they're offering different benefits here than they are here. That's the spirit of this. And I think that the minimum wage,
Would you agree that the cost of living is different in Columbia than it is in?
sure, absolutely.
In Monotone?
Sure.
County? So shouldn't local municipalities be able to decide what their minimum wage could be if they wanted to make it higher? And my very question is to protect the spirit of the law that.
I think local municipalities could raise a minimum wage in the public sector. I do not believe that they have the authority, nor should they have the authority, to raise local minimum wage in the private sector.
But the state has that authority.
They do.
Gotcha.
And that's where the conversation should happen.
I think that the local municipality should have the right to raise minimum wage in their local municipality because their cost of living in Columbia is much different from the cost of living in St. Louis. So I think if, $6.50 is the state minimum wage now, I mean, we go with the higher federal minimum wage. It should be high. If we as a municipality think that it should be higher, I think it should certainly be higher. Now let's ban the box. You're aware of how it came about. You represent that area.
Sure.
And can you share with the committee how the ban the box ordinance?
In Columbia?
How it kind of.
Yeah, so there was a pretty significant spike in violence in Columbia over the past 3 to 4 years, I think probably more significantly. And so part of the effort at the city level to try and figure out opportunities and ways to combat that, put together a task force that had a couple of members of the city council and a number of other community stakeholders. And one of the things that they came back with was the ban the box piece. Actually, my understanding is that may have been the only thing they came back with. But so they come back with ban the box, and again, part of the conversation that got to the point of passage of the ordinance was they had conversations with the business community. Business community to some degree was represented on the task force, and they had come to the conclusion that if they were going to pass ban the box, there were certain parameters that they were willing to live with, and even in Columbia, the pride was willing to make some concessions, and basically just go along with it because most of them already do it. Most of them don't. It doesn't really impact them.
Gotcha.
And so in between the time, my understanding, and I've heard this story from a number of different people, but my understanding is that in between the time that they kind of made that agreement and in the time that the local ordinance passed, there were a number of changes that happened to it, and the most significant of it being that that they moved it from taking the box off the application to you can't ask, you can't have that conversation in an interview. I believe the Columbia ordinance says that you can't look up the job applicant on CaseNet, which is obviously in no way enforceable by any standard whatsoever. And so, the Columbia ordinance is a bit of an anomaly, and I will certainly concede that. But I think it speaks to a much broader conversation of
So let's
the role
roll the
of
conversation a little bit. What do you believe that job opportunities for felons keeps them from deters recidivism?
I believe that if they have opportunities to get jobs.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Do you believe that asking a felon? Do you believe that marking down that you have a felony on a job application prevents felons from getting jobs?
In some cases, sure.
So how do you cope with
If the
those
only
two
goal
realizations?
was the only goal was to keep felons from going back to prison, then that's one thing. But that's not our only goal here.
But that is a solution. To make, if you know that felons are gonna be thrown out of an opportunity for getting a job by just marking a box on an application, sure. And you know that keeping them from getting back into criminal activity, doing violent acts, is antecedent, not having a job is antecedent for them going back to jail. Wouldn't there be an easy solution just to ban the box?
So do we think that ban the box will absolutely keep a felon out of prison?
Yeah, well, I think you just said, yeah. I think,
I
you know,
certainly
I
think
think
it's
you just said,
possible.
yeah. And
I don't know what I'd say it's probable, but
here's what I'll go with it. Your constituents strongly support the ban the box.
I don't believe that that's true.
Other
But
than your non-business constituents.
if it went to a vote in Columbia, it would fail. Overwhelming,
But it was passed by,
the city council.
who are voted by
Sure.
your constituents. So have those city councilmen failed?
Oh, I think that they certainly overstepped their bounds.
Have they failed in an election?
No. Well, we've only had one election since then.
Gotcha.
And only one.
So you, straight up, you believe you believe that you're doing the bidding of your constituents by restricting ban the box.
I believe that the clarification of where these decisions should happen is the absolute right thing to do.
But you,
I certainly
you
believe,
that-
I believe I'm representing a majority of my constituents without question.
You do believe you would represent a majority of the city of Columbia.
Absolutely. Well, I represent,
I know.
Yeah.
You believe you represent a majority.
if
of
this went to a vote in the
city
city of Columbia, it would fail.
So you're representing a majority of the people in the city of Columbia.
I would
with this bill. How else do you, if you, ban the box has been known to give felons job opportunities. How else do you expect to give felons job opportunities without keeping them from those opportunities at
I think you could provide, I think you could provide, I think I've seen some instances in other states where, there's grant programs or incentive programs that provide, private business with, an opportunity if they want to go down that path and if they want to make that decision, to hire a felon,
we know nothing is done better than banning the box. We know that'll. So let's talk about the result of banning the box. That's my first question. Let's talk about even if there is no box, someone gets a job offer and they have a felony that say they get a job offer at a daycare and they have a felony that has to do with children.
Sure.
And the employer still has the ability to ask them and do a background check after they've done the job offer. And they're prevented from, they have the opportunity not to allow that person to be interacting with their children.
I don't know that would be true. So
let me paint a little better for you. There's a felon, child abuse felon.
Okay.
Applies for a job at a daycare. And the box is not there. They don't put that on the application. They get a job offer. The employer says, we gotta do a background check on you now that we did the job offer. They do a background check, they found out there's child abuse. What does the employer do next?
They would cut ties with them probably as quickly as possible.
So the children never interact with that child abuse.
So how is it any better for the person to receive a job offer and think they have a job and then it will get pulled out from under them? And in doing so, you're opening up the business to litigation. So not only do they not have a job and they're going to go back into.
There is no litigation. Because
I'm not, you certainly don't defend
the
it.
ordinance, I can say the ordinance clearly states that you can have a background check after you've given a job offer. What you propose is that you want to keep all these folks who you say are, will have job opportunities if there isn't a payment box. You're going to hurt more people than you're going to help. Can we agree with that? If you're just trying to find that one felon that applying at a daycare, you're gonna keep all the other job opportunities for other felons.
I certainly don't believe that you
away
can.
just for one instance where the employer still has an opportunity not to hire them, cut ties with them, as you say, and not allow them to ever get close to the children or get close to those children, or let's just use a more broader, become a part of that company or organization.
And I think I certainly understand your point. And like I said before, the purest form ban the box is not inherently a bad thing in any stretch. And you will see the market will dictate and private sector eventually will, for the most part, in many industries and already have begun to move away from that. I said from the merits of bandbox.
But you're
It's not-
prohibiting the merits of bandbox.
I am
If the purest,
clarifying where this decision needs to happen.
if the purest form of bandbox is good, you're prohibiting local municipalities from being able to enact that pure form.
There is no place, there's no place that gives local ordinance the ability to do that. So we're dealing in gray area. Maybe you agree with that, I don't know.
Yeah.
So we're dealing in this gray area of who's making the decision and what level the decision will be made. So it's not, for me, it's not, we can sit down and have a conversation about bandbox at the state level, and frankly, it's probably a little bit of a different conversation. But I do believe.
Would you support bandbox at the state level?
I think maybe, I'd have to look at it, but given the right parameters, I certainly might.
Representative, let me just step in real quick. I know we got to move along, but we got to be back in session. Are there people that are here to testify in favor of this bill? Okay, and are there here to testify? We've got some people that are going to want to testify. Representative Butler, if you'd be brief and wrap up, and then if we have other questions from the bill sponsors, we'll move on to folks that came in.
Thank you for that. I think we've had a good conversation.
I love talking to you.
Same here. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Other questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, are there those who are here to testify in favor? Each being 65, please come forward. Witness. Quorum. Proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Chamber, any ordinance that is in place by any municipality. This is actually an issue that's a national trend, and in fact, we have already taken some, passed some sort of legislation that's very similar to this. So it's a chamber and our members because without this legislation, every city in the state can impose their own regulations on employers. And that could be up to 1,000. I think we're up to 1,000 municipalities at this point. That would not only create a nightmare of bureaucracy, but it really would undermine the ability of Missouri to be known as a business-friendly state and for us to compete for jobs. So we believe it's very, very important. We also believe that the Missouri business community is already in a challenging regulatory environment. If you talk to employers, they'll say that regulations are hindering them from creating jobs as well as stability and uncertainty. And we believe that this legislation takes care of those issues. So I'll just stop there because I know that there's a lot of people here to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Representative Rose. Proceed.
Have similar language. Is that with all three of these issues or just one, or?
It varies. Some states just have one, some have multiple issues within. There are states that go further on a level for like discrimination laws that they have to be on a statewide level. We did not go that route in this legislation, so it varies differently.
So are there other states of the 30s?
Yeah, I believe Mississippi, Florida, Kansas. I'm trying to look through the list here, but there are several.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was just one or all of them or whatever. So thank you.
Representative Grant.
Thank you, Ms. King. So I think you said that all those municipalities, you didn't. When I get it, you don't think the municipalities have enough sense to enact laws. Or the I mean, why do we have municipalities? Are you saying the Missouri Chamber wants to get rid of all these municipalities? It's too much on local different government altogether. Yeah, I did not local municipalities the inability, to pass laws. I mean, I used to work for the municipal league, so I work very closely with cities all over the state. I believe what my testimony and what I meant to say, if I didn't, that in order to remain competitive, it's important that these issues are held on statewide. Some regulations on how those laws are enacted in every one of those municipalities. It is a burden, and it increases to do business here in Missouri. And because there's municipalities, it's hard to keep all the different laws.
SB 65. See when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, William McCarty, President of the Associated Industries of Missouri, want to go on record in support of this legislation. And also, I have a witness for the same time from David Oberfeld from the Missouri Retailers Association and the Missouri Grocers Association. Just wanted to say that while the Columbia ordinance was being contemplated, I injected into the conversation in Columbia, and the mayor actually proposed an amendment to that ordinance that would have been acceptable to us. It would have said, even though you're banning the box, it would have allowed that conversation to occur during the interview process. And he couldn't get a second, as I understand, at the meeting. And so the ordinance was adopted without that provision. And so now what you have is a situation someone will go through and actually have a conditional offer of employment, which is actually a letter usually sent to the person saying, we're offering you the job based on subject to whatever the conditions are, which is a background check. So the person will get, their hopes up possibly that they may have a job, and then have them crushed if it comes back and then says that they are not eligible for the job because of this finding. We think it makes a lot more sense to allow employers to have that conversation up front as it is today. There are people who have bad records that are able to address that with an employer up front, be able to explain what the steps that they've taken to change their lives. And that happens today all the time. Employers do give people second chances, and that's why we have people that have felonies that may not be related to the job that they're being asked to perform. They're being hired today. But what we're doing, to just say that to keep employers ignorant is the only way to get people hired when they have these convictions in their record is not the right way to go. But it also is a decision that should be made by you as policymakers at the state level, not something that should be done piecemeal by local governments. And so we support this bill. We think that this is a conversation that belongs here at the state level, not something that should be done at the local level. I can answer questions.
Thank you. Representative Bonner. Please proceed.
Will employers still have a second chance, or I guess an applicant have a second chance to explain their criminal infractions after the job offer? After the background check has been done?
I would think so, yes. But I would think it would, we also have a responsibility as employers to provide a safe workplace. And that is something that we take very seriously. Hiring somebody who has a violent background is something that employers need to know up front before they get into that. And I would think it would be a much smoother process rather than an employer having to find out about it after the fact, after they've made a conditional offer of employment and feeling like they may have, they've already entered into a situation now where this person may have been hiding something. Wouldn't it be much better if they would have been able to address that in the interview process up front? Person can say, look, I've had this conviction for this thing. This is what happened. These are the steps I've taken to correct it, or maybe some education that I've got along the way, or maybe
they still have the opportunity to do that after the background.
But they can do it up front, representatives, before they even go through that step.
You mentioned a safe place.
Yes.
Lawyer has responsibility to create a safe workplace.
Right.
They still have that opportunity to create a safe workplace.
They have a responsibility.
They will still be able to have a safe workplace after they've done a job offer and done a background check.
Right, it just takes more time on the part of the employer as well as the potential employee. We wasted their time, we wasted the employer's time as well.
You create a safe workplace.
And you may have laid them open for a lawsuit. We don't know yet how that Columbia ordinance is going to work out. This is the first time it's been applied to private employers. So we don't know yet if some clever person is going to try to use this as a way to bring a lawsuit against the employer and how that will work out.
I think it's pretty clear.
We don't know yet. Because it's never been done before, Representative. We don't know.
I think there are plenty of lawsuits out there about not hiring someone because you have the box. And, you open yourself up to lawsuits for putting, disqualifying people because they're felons. So you're gonna be open to a lawsuit. What, would you agree to that?
No, I really wouldn't, but we have yet to see. This ordinance is new. It's the first time it's been applied to private employers. And so we don't really know how the courts are going to rule on this.
I don't agree to that. I think the courts would assess the ordinance.
Further questions for the witness? Seeing none, is there anyone else to testify in favor of HB8?
Our bill, I want to draw attention to the minimum wage. My restaurants are concerned because you may not be on the right side of the street if the local municipality would happen to raise their local minimum wage. It would create a competitive disadvantage for that restaurant. So that's why we oppose this bill. But we also oppose the check box and the other provision.
Any questions for the witness? Representative Butler.
Most restaurants have a separate minimum wage. Tip employees, correct?
It's half the hourly minimum wage by statute.
Gotcha.
Voters voted on it in 2006, I believe.
So we'll take a vote of the people.
No, the legislature could do it.
Gotcha.
The legislature by statute could repeal I think it was Prop B that passed by a substantial majority. So you can go the initiative petition route, which is what that one did, or the legislature could make that determination.
Further questions for the witness? Seeing none. Is there anyone else in favor of HB 865? Please proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Michael Grote appearing on behalf of Citizens for Better Columbia. We would also like to go on record in support of this legislation. I think there's a number of issues that have been brought up, and ways to address reintegration is a very important thing. I'm not sure that ban the box helps reintegration of felons to get those jobs. A couple of things I can do and have been shown to be positive. One is you simply have job placement programs that are directed towards that population, helping them find jobs coming back out of the reintegration workforce. The second, probably most important one, is looking at what we consider felonies and addressing that huge list of nonviolent crimes and simply saying, okay, those records are sealed, working through a legal process to ensure that people who have been convicted of crimes have done their time and have, if it's nonviolent, and so it's a situation where maybe it's not going to be in a school or something like that, but allow those records to be sealed to ensure that person can come back into the workforce. I think those are programs which help the reintegration of that population to get back into the workforce. I'm not sure that and Representative Butler, to address your question of would they have an opportunity after the fact? I think they would, yes. But after the fact, maybe as an employer, I'm going to feel deceived, where we went through this interview process, we had this great conversation, and you failed to tell me that you were a violent felon. And so after the fact, I'm kind of going to question that a little bit and say, well, was I deceived in the interview process? Whereas, why didn't you just tell me that up front? Why didn't you tell me you've gone through these programs, et cetera? And I'm still going to go ahead and hire you. I think there are programs out there that help with that reintegration of the population, which are better than the symbol of check the box, ban the box, ban the box. And I think that's probably a more productive way for us to go to state. So for that reason, it's support this legislation.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, anyone else testifying in support of HB 865? Let's come forward, proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, Brad Jones with the NFIB, and we'd like to talk about this bill.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Anybody else testifying in favor of this bill? Seeing none. Anybody else who testify in opposition of HB 865? Please come forward, go to witness form, and proceed when you're ready.
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Bill Gamble. I'm a registered lobbyist appearing on behalf of the city of Kansas City. I think I'm up here more for clarification and defense than anything else. And I don't think we've been real clear in our opinion about this piece of legislation. Let's start with, first of all, with ban the box. I sit in the Senate committee that the provisions of this bill weren't on our radar screen in Kansas City, and I will go through why. First of all, ban the box. Yes, we did ban the box in the city of Kansas City, but I think that you don't want this done in us. This is for the city only. We have no desire, or there's nothing on the agenda to force this on employers within the city. This was done within the city, but let's put this into full perspective. We have a revolutionary crime fighting program, and Representative Corley knows a lot about this, and it's called NOVA, and we've cut down our murder rate, and it involves social networking, and out of 450, almost 500,000 people, we know we're down to 862 individuals that are the problem and are more likely to commit a violent crime. But what you do is you also have to interact with these people. You have to give them a job. You have to give them a chance. So if you look at what we've done, yes, we banned the box, but to give these kids an opportunity, and they're kids, to be quite honest with you, and they're not gangs. But what we have done, though, is we believe in background checks. And so we have background checks that we require employees in sensitive positions to go through, much as is the policy of this state of Missouri. You require background checks on individuals that have a close relationship with others, nursing home attendants, and anybody that works in a nursing home, anybody that works in an assisted living, school bus drivers, realtors, professional licenses. I don't know if attorneys have to, but gosh, I hope so. You have a policy of if an individual's with another individual and they're by themselves and they're in a sensitive position, to have a background check. So let's look at the whole picture here. Yes, we banned the box. Why did we? Let's try to get some of these people employed. Let's try to get them a job. Let's try to rehabilitate them. At the same time, if you're in a sensitive position, you're going to do a background check. On the other part about the, we're not going to, there is nothing on our radar screen to require employees in the city to have to provide certain employee benefits. It's just not there. What frustrates the citizens, the people that I represent, the city council and Mayor James, is, no offense, Mr. Chairman, but San Francisco, St. Louis, and Kansas City. Well, you know what? We are not San Francisco. I almost am about ready to say, will you please, Boone County and Columbia, will you secede and we won't have any of these problems anymore? It will really help a lot. So we don't have any problem. Now let's talk about the minimum wage. One of the things that happened in the minimum wage is, yes, as you had a bill introduced here, we had an ordinance introduced by one member for a city minimum wage. It was written outside the council, not through our law department. It was introduced. There was a hearing. I have confidential memo from our law department, and this is why it's in the Senate committee. It's not on our radar screen. We can't do it. As the chairman said, 6715.71 forbids us from doing it. The constitutional amendment, or I'm sorry, not the constitutional amendment, but the initiative that was passed requiring the statewide minimum wage prohibits us from doing it. So we can't, and there's also in the ordinance that says that private parties can sue. We can't do that. We're a constitutional charter city. There are some things we can do. There are a lot of things we can't do if it's prohibited by the statute. We can't do it. This ordinance is not valid. It will not pass. It's been taken from committee. It's now under review by the lawyers, our city council. It will not pass. We've had that discussion. I want to make that clear. Mayor James has gone on record saying that this ordinance is not legal. So I guess what I'm saying is what we got the effect as far as the city of Kansas City on this bill is we really, really mean it. We don't want you to do it a minimum wage. We already have the statute in place. This gives us an opportunity to talk about how evil and bad the cities are. Now, I'm going to force you to listen to a little bit about how evil and bad we are. I just testified on one of our best employers. Cerner. This is the biggest economic development project in the state's history. 16,000 jobs, 4,500 construction jobs. City threw everything but the kitchen sink to bring this into this state. Huge. The 11th Street TIF, it's a DST property. Projected revenues 45.5, 58.3 million projected revenues. Actual projected jobs 600. Projected jobs 600. Actual jobs 5,500. IRS Center. You're talking about doing the geospatial, whatever you're talking about in St. Louis. Well, you're a little behind in St. Louis because we did our IRS Center. We brought jobs in from Kansas. We did that in 2003. Projected revenues about 40 million. We're at 48 million right now. Jobs 4,000. Actual jobs almost 6,000. Power and Light District. This has been huge. Projected jobs 2,000. Actual jobs 6,100. We've just announced that we're building the second new 25-story high-rise apartment building in the city of Kansas City. We are at 98% occupancy in apartments right now. Our population has gone from 6,000, we'll go to 25,000 in the urban core. This is huge. The Sprint Center, we built that. Kansas City built that, and their citizens built the Sprint Center. It's the 10th most successful venue in the country. First city for Google Fiber. They came in, briefing book, and I am told Mayor James shut the briefing book and said, let's do it. We're going to be the second city in the world to be a Cisco smart city. Same situation. We've got $1.8 billion worth of development from the river to Union Station. Top 5 city in the world to start a tech business. And you know what? The citizens of Jackson County refitted our stadiums without $400 million from the state. Now, those are just a few of the things that we're doing in Kansas City. And let's talk about economic development. I love you, but you know what? Data centers is not a biggie. We just need to start doing some major economic development programs here. The chairman came over and met in Kansas City, and we discussed that. We talked about it. We're going to lose another congressional seat. We're not keeping pace with the other states. You know, we're falling behind, and we need to move forward. And we want to partner with you to move forward. But I believe legislation like this that really doesn't accomplish anything other than what is currently on the statute creates an impression that we are opposed to each other. We're in a big fight between the cities and the state where we should be working together and we should be moving forward. Be happy to take any questions. Sorry about my rant, but you know what? It just kind of, I've been here where we've really moved forward and done some amazing things. And we need to start doing that again.
Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Any questions for witness? Seeing none. Anyone else to testify in opposition to the bill? Seeing none. Anyone? Oh, come forward, please, sir. Sorry. Please proceed with your rant.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Stack. I'm the Missouri Fellowship of Reconciliation. I enjoyed visiting with Representative Rowden over the years, but on this particular measure, I was hoping at first that he was going to start to go towards supporting raising the minimum wage. I was rooting for that to come up next to statewide effort, but that wasn't to be. But I think that I've spent most of my last few decades in Columbia, and I do appreciate the notion of local control in each municipality, as Representative Walker was talking about. There's different realities that are faced by municipalities, and folks know how much it costs, and so I think there's good reason to support some local control in this measure. I think actually, I could disagree respectfully with you about one thing about the debate about banning the box in Columbia. One of the council members who was a strong supporter of the measure was in fact reelected this last time around.
Yeah, I said one.
Did you? Oh, you did.
Yeah, I did
catch it.
one.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry about that. My fault.
It's-
My apologies.
Yeah, you're good.
But anyway, I do think that there would be a support for that in Columbia among the voters. So, but I would encourage folks not to support this measure because I do think local control counts for something as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that folks have. There's no longer here nor there.
Thank you. Any brief questions for the witness? See none. Anyone else to testify in opposition to HB 865? See none. Is there anyone here to testify for informational purposes on the bill? See none. Any final comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee.
One moment, Representative Crack.
I do want to thank Mr. Gamble for not mentioning the Cardinals Royals.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Roberts. That concludes the hearing on HB 865.
Committee will now move into executive session. I move that House Bill 855 be voted to pass. In discussion, I have an amendment. It ends in .02H. It has been distributed. I move for its adoption. This bill is the bill that we heard a couple of weeks ago, or last week, regarding the Boone County TIF Commission. The bill was greeted fairly coldly in this committee, and so we went back. Or you may like it. So we background. This is part of an ongoing. I was going to say TIF between the city and the state. Yeah, battle would be more apropos. Regarding some abuses in the TIF world by the city. And so what we've done, we went back to the drawing board in an effort. I talked to some of you about feeling that the initial bill swings the pendulum too far in a certain direction. And so the amendment makes some changes, and what it does is it provides more equal representation between the city and the county. And so basically the gist of it is that it allows 4 members from the city to serve on the TIF commission, 4 members from the county, 2 members from the school district, and 1 member from any other affected, impacted taxing entity. So that can be a fire district, etc. So we think that this provides a little more continuity, a little fair representation between the city and the county. I had a conversation with Representative Zaire, who is the chairwoman of the committee on top of ours. She had some problems with it. The St. Charles County TIF Commission, she's not a big fan of, and so we talked with her and got some advice on how theirs functions, how ours could function to make it a little better for the citizens of Mid-Missouri. So that's what the amendment does, and mind you, that it doesn't change the fact that this only applies to Boone County and City of Columbia. Questions on the amendment? Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Just to clarify, you're just basically amendment is changing the number of members.
Yeah. So the initial bill changed the makeup of the commission. This would change how the commission is made up to provide more representation for the city, basically equal representation for the city and the county, and then 3 additional members for affected taxing entities, i.e. school board or school district.
So the first one was 11 members, now
This is still 11 members. Yeah. The makeup is just a little more.
so it's just the makeup is basically just all this, not doing anything else in it. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
So this will make the city and county up there sit around the campfire, sing Kumbaya together.
You know, Mr. Vincent, I don't know that I want to go that far on the record, but I will say, you know, the whole point of this has been to help re-engage in the conversation, and I feel like hopefully this is seen as a good faith effort on our part to want them to come to the table and have the conversation about, you know, the maybe some of the ways that the tips have been used in the past. And so I certainly hope that that can be accomplished. Yep.
Does Boone County currently have a tip commission?
They do. Yeah. Yeah, they have a 9-person.
And the city of Columbia has a separate commission, a separate tip commission.
That's not right. No, I don't believe it.
I thought they do, so there's two separate commissions, and this creates a county commission that will then supersede the city commission.
Well, it creates the idea is that it creates a commission that is represented by both the city and the county and the affected.
Does the county commission supersede the city commission?
In this case, yes, I believe that's right.
I believe that's what the language
Yes,
says.
I think
Yeah.
there was some confusion on that.
Yeah, how I interpret, both of them have separate commission. I think Boone County and the city of both have separate commissions, and of course Boone County controls theirs. I think a TIF is a municipal. That's more of a municipal task or responsibility, not a county responsibility. We're just talking about local government, and I don't mind them both having their own separate commissions. I just don't think the county should supersede what happens in the city of Columbia. If I'm the county executive, then I need to let the mayor do what he needs to do for his city and city council for their own city. Same be told for Ashland or for any other city, municipality in Boone County. Ashland is in Boone County. Correct. Gotcha. So
Good call. Good call.
I think so. From my understanding, even with the makeup, I'm okay with the makeup. I understand you try to move a little closer to where the cities have a little more say. As long as the county commission supersedes the city commission, I mean, you're taking away their local ability to make decisions about their own municipality.
I guess my only response to that would be that it makes it so that the people who are impacted by the enacting of the TIF actually have a seat at the table. So I don't know that part of the pushback from some of probably vast majority of Columbians, there was this spat 2 years ago or something, and some abuses that people saw as it relates to the TIF. Part of the frustration was they just felt like it was just getting rammed right through. And you know, some cases maybe to the detriment of a local school district or a local ambulance district or a local fire district or whatever. And so while the case can be made that, you know, one quote unquote trumps the other, neither one of them has on the superseding commission, if you will, no one really has a louder voice than the other, because I mean, obviously the city, the school districts are going to vote based on what's best for them. The other impacted entity that has the other seat are going to vote, you know, going to have want to say it for what's best for them, and then the others for. So I mean, if it's, you know, if it's
But the level, so
I certainly I get your point. I really do. And I don't know that I'm necessarily, but you know, we could. It's a fair point.
Gotcha.
It is a fair point. Yeah. Any other questions?
So, you know, I'm just a little concerned about us trying to solve the problem that the county and the city's having in Columbia. To me, am I reading this wrong? I mean,
No, it's been there a long time.
it's been there a long time, so.
Yeah. No, I think.
You know, that's a local issue. And I lived in Columbia at one time, but I wasn't aware that, I wasn't in the political side at the time, or aware of the issues going on. So I'm just, I just need to be comfortable with the fact that this, I need to understand why they couldn't solve this without us trying to solve it.
We can certainly help enlighten you.
Oh, I could use some enlightenment. Maybe I'm just reading the whole thing,
No, I certainly believe that there,
This would be, to me, like coming over here, representing my district from Pike County and City of Bowling Green versus the county commissioners. And I want to solve their problem with what they need to get done back there. I look to their leadership I look to the people elected to solve that problem that they might be having. I don't know if this is a big problem or if this is more of an administrative.
I think the maybe a little bit of response to that would be that, again, kind of going back to the first the bill we just heard, sometimes the outside perspective is needed in an issue like this. And so, a perspective that goes above that of the cities and even that of the counties is needed to provide, some level of perspective as to how this should operate. And so if there are abuses to an existing process and a process that has been put in place by the state, if there are abuses there, then it certainly falls within the state's power to take another look at the process that has led to those abuses.
Okay, now you're more educated. This is your area.
Yes.
Your commissioner, your mayor of Columbia, and all them, they're happy with this solution.
I'm not sure anybody's happy. This is we had a conversation with certainly the Boone County is pushing this, and I feel like that probably is fairly obvious at this point. So it was an attempt in a change to the makeup. It was certainly an attempt to bring a more level approach to what we're trying to do here. And I think it's probably a two-pronged approach. One is functional, and one is, certainly I would like to be in a position in my area where the city and the county have a better relationship and have the ability to sit around the campfire and
this will improve their relationship.
I certainly hope it will, and I think it could. Maybe I'm young and naive. I'm not young anymore. I may still be naive. Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of adopting House Amendment 1 to House Bill 855, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You have rolled the amendment into the bill. Now we'll move that House Bill 855 as amended be voted to pass. Any additional discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Rowden. Corlew. Austin. Beard. Butler.
No.
Hogan. Dunn. Hanson. Johnson. Kratky.
No.
Lichtenegger. Couch.
Aye.
Rizzo. No.
If I motivate the three of you, voted House Bill 855 to pass. We have 5 minutes. I want to draw the committee's attention to one thing real quick before we get out of here. A number of weeks ago, we heard from we are going to also quickly exec on Senator Richards' Senate Bill 194. So I move that Senate Bill 194 be voted to pass. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Rowden. Corlew.
This is the one that we just heard from Senator Rowden.
Austin.
Aye.
Beard.
Aye.
Butler.
Aye.
Hogan.
Aye.
Dunn. Hanson.
Aye.
Johnson. Kratky.
Aye.
Lichtenegger. Couch.
Aye.
Rizzo.
Aye. By your vote of 11-0, you have voted Senate Bill 194 to pass. House Bill, before we get out, House Bill 528 was a bill we heard a number of weeks ago from Representative Munsell, dealing with the Baldridge Award and a tax credit for those, any business who receives the Baldridge Award. What I'd like to do over the course of the next few days is make some attempts to tighten the bill up a little bit. And so if I could ask, if I could divulge, if I could be indulged by the committee to take a look at that House Bill 528, if there are improvements that can be made to kind of get it, maybe, this is based on conversations that I've had with members of the committee, get it more in line with maybe some of our current credits, as far as job requirements or some things like that. If there are any input that you guys would have as far as to how to make that better, I would certainly welcome those, and we may take another look at that bill here in the next week. But I would love to have your input before we do so. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.